One of the big benefits of running D&D with Foundry VTT is that we can automate a lot of the stuff which we would normally have to remember ourselves. Did you remember to check for concentration when you got hit? Oh, your chill touch limits movement, did you remember to apply that? Or maybe you just don't want to manually have to check AC to see if an attack hit an NPC every single time. Luckily, there is a module that takes care of all of this and so much more, and it's called Midi QOL. This is hands down the best module for automating your D&D games in Foundry VTT. Let me show you how it works. Hi there, my name is Fondue, your VTT wizard, and I have over 300 hours using Foundry VTT. On this channel called Dice and Easy, I give you VTT tutorials and daily TTRPG memes as YouTube shorts, so if that sounds like your thing, hit that subscribe button down there. First, before we get started, you should know that I'm running the latest stable release of Foundry version 10. I know version 11 is the latest stable version, but I cannot guarantee that all the stuff here works in version 11 the same. Secondly, this automation is only meant for the D&D 5e game system and will not work with other systems. Thirdly, there are a bunch of modules that you need to install together with Midi QOL, and they are as follows. Dynamic Active Effects, sometimes abbreviated to DAE, Times Up, Simple Calendar, and Item Macros. In addition to these mandatory modules, the following modules are also highly recommended to install together with Midi QOL. Let me roll that for you, or Monk's Token Bar, or you can have both installed if you want. Convenient Effects or Combat Utility Belt, or you can have both installed once again. Token Magic, Small Time, Automated Animations. This can be combined with JB2A's module, but you have to be part of their Patreon to get full access to all the animated assets. DFQOL, DF Template Enhancements, Warp Gate, Build a Bonus, Template Macros, and Effect Macros. Now I know that's a lot of modules to install just for Midi QOL, but trust me, all of these will allow you to take your game automation to a whole new level. You can find a link to all the modules mentioned in this video in the description box below. As I mentioned briefly in the start of the video, Midi QOL is a module for Foundry VTT that allows you to automate a lot of the gameplay of D&D 5e. You can automate things like attack and damage rolls, checking if an attack hits based off the target AC, applying effects, applying damage to targets, and so much more. Honestly, this module is an incredible tool for automation, second to none. With the help of all of those other modules I mentioned before, the automation goes even further with being able to do things like automatically manage save throws and even adding animations to attacks, spells, and other effects. There is actually one additional module that takes all of this automation even further beyond, but I'll go through that module in my next video. Subscribe to my channel to know when that one goes live. But enough of me just talking about what Midi QOL is. Let me show you how the module works and what all the different settings do so you can set it up to do exactly what you want. Let's jump over to Foundry. All right, we are now inside Foundry VTT, and first things first, always remember to activate all of those modules that I mentioned, Midi QOL and all the other modules, before you start doing anything, because otherwise things won't work. And I would be careful in checking that you have all of those modules actually activated. Just check them one by one to make sure you don't miss any of them, because when you activate Midi QOL, it's going to activate some of the other dependent ones as well, but not the recommended ones. So go through them and be thorough. So now that I have Midi QOL activated, this is what it would look like if I do an attack. So my character sheet is open here, my character is down here, and they're going to attack this character that is targeted with the red things over here. So if I use a light crossbow attack, you can see that it rolls the dice without any extra dialogue, also rolls the damage roll here without any extra dialogue, and there was also a little animation that played. Let's play that again so we can focus on the animation. There, you see this little bolt that shot there. So I didn't have to click those extra dialogues to determine what type of roll I want to make and what type of damage roll I type to make. They're all inputted down here in the chat as well. And that's kind of the very, very basics of Midi QOL. That's what it looks like. But in order for you to get Midi QOL working in this manner, in the manner that you exactly want to, we're going to have to look at the settings for Midi QOL. So let's jump into the settings so I can show you exactly what all those different things will change, because there's a lot of stuff in Midi QOL and it can feel kind of daunting. So first things first, top right corner, we go into game settings, configure settings. My face is on top of it, but they're configure settings. Then once we have this window open, we can type here in the filter, or we can just scroll down to Midi QOL. We click that, and now we have the Midi QOL menu here available. Let me just close the character sheet there. All right, before we jump into the workflow settings, let me show you the basic settings here. So I've already made some changes here. So the default settings don't quite look like this. So that's why I want to run you through on what I have activated and what I don't have activated. So first things first, enable role automation support. If enabled, automation of roles can be configured in the workflow settings panel. So all the stuff that we're going to go into in this one, which is a lot of the automation stuff, basically if you untap this, none of that will work. So this should be on by default and leave it as such, because this will basically take care of all of the automation. If you have this unselected, the module's not going to do that much. Then add attack/damage buttons to the item inventory list. Add roll bonus to item descriptions. These buttons support Control-Alt-Shift to skip the dialogue. So this adds some attack and damage buttons to your inventory list for your character, so you can easily roll attack and damage from the item inventory list. Actually, let's have a quick look at it. So now that we're here in the inventory part of my character, there's a light crossbow. If I click on it, there's buttons here that says standard roll, attack, damage, etc. So if I click these, it will do a standard roll that you can see that just got inputted in chat down there. So that's what that button does. GM sees all whispered messages. This is pretty self-explanatory. You as the GM can see all of the whispered messages when you normally couldn't. So if you want that, you can certainly do that. I personally don't see any need for that, but if you want to, you can. Really hide private/blind/self rolls. Display nothing to non-recipients for private, blind, self rolls. So this essentially makes it so that if you roll a private or blind or self roll, there will be nothing inputted into the chat for the other users, because normally when you use one of these types of roles without any module like this to actually hide them, you're going to get a chat message nonetheless that just has question marks on it, but people will know that you made a roll. So this way you can hide yourself making a roll. Fast forward ability rolls. Clicking on an ability to start, check, save, or a skill roll will auto forward. So auto forwarding and the like will be discussed a little bit more once we get to the workflows, but this essentially means that when you click an ability roll in your character sheet, it won't open the dialogue asking, is this a normal roll with advantage or disadvantage? You just click it and then it just rolls. So it skips that one extra dialogue, which I find personally to be very nice, because having to every time basically click 2 times to make a roll is a little bit frustrating. So getting rid of that one extra step just makes the game flow a lot nicer. Now, if you're thinking, how do you handle rolling with advantage or disadvantage, you can actually set those up to different keys. So when you hold a key and then roll, it will roll with disadvantage or advantage respectively. I personally have those bound to Control and Shift. I think the defaults are Control and Alt. We can have a look later at the controls where you can actually change those. I'll show you later. All right, then drag and drop targeting. So if you want to make it so that your players can target a token by dragging an item onto them, you can click this. I personally don't use it, but if you want to, you certainly can. Choose critical damage for the game master. So here you can choose what type of critical damage settings you want to use, because, you know, the normal D&D settings are you roll the same amount of dice twice, and that's the number you get. But some people find that this can lead to some very unsatisfying results. You know, if you roll 1 die and then you get to roll 2 and they're both 1s, then that's not very satisfying. So there's a bunch of different options that you can choose from here. So this is for the GM only, and then you have the same for players as well. So that as a GM, maybe you want to keep the, you know, traditional D&D style, but then for the players, you want something more, you know, satisfying. So you can choose those here, and then it will change that for all your rolls. Then add damage buttons to chat messages. Now, this one actually I think is a fantastic feature. I think it is turned off by default. I highly recommend turning this on for the GM, and let me show you what it does. I need to move my camera to the other side, so just a sec. So here we see these light crossbow attacks that I did. We see that it hit the acolyte, and if I hover my mouse over the damage number, you will see these buttons that appear. You have click to apply the whole damage, half damage, quarter damage, or double damage. Or you can also heal and add temp HP. So these are the buttons that those settings are talking about. It basically just gives you an easy way to apply damage. I like to do it like this myself. There is also, as we're going to jump into later, a way for you to automatically apply damage to tokens whenever they are hit, but I personally find it a little bit hard to keep track of, was the damage actually applied, were the correct resistances or damage immunities or vulnerabilities applied. Like I have a hard time keeping track of that when it's fully automated, so I like having these buttons so that I can do it myself, because then I know that the damage has been applied. Of course, if you want to fully automate that, you can. We'll jump into that in a little bit. Okay, now back to the settings menu. Colored border messages. Basically what this does is add a colored border between different message cards in the chat. You can have none if you would like, or you can have just the borders around the cards. You can also have it around the border and the name text or the name background. So it's up to you if you want to separate those elements to make them a little more legible. Late targeting. So when rolling with auto roll attack set, items which are not AoE, ranged, or self-targeting will pause and wait for targets to be selected. So essentially this is saying that, if you do an AoE spell or a ranged spell and you don't have a target selected, if you have this selected, it will wait for you to select a target. I currently don't use it, but you might find it interesting to use this. So by default it's no late targeting, but you can also have it late target if none selected, always display late targeting, so it will always basically wait for that. So you can go for that if you like. Then we have untarget at the end of turn. At the end of your turn, choose which targets to automatically untarget. So here you can basically choose to never untarget anything if you like, but I find it at least useful to untarget dead targets at the end of the turn, because most likely you're not going to be targeting the same target if they're already dead, so you can turn that off. Of course, you can go even further with this if you would like. And players control owned hidden tokens. I believe this means that if a player owns a token and it is hidden, they still have control over it and they can see it. However, this is experimental. It says might work, so that might be quite wonky. I would be very careful with it. These last three ones are mostly meant for developers, so you're not really going to care about it. Enable debugging is if something's not working, you can enable this to get more information, and then you could make a better bug report, but most likely you're not going to care about this. Log execution timing, also something meant for developers so that you can have better logging of the debug stuff. And then utilizing item hooks, these are just meant for author testing. Do not use this. All right, now that we've gone through the basic settings, you're thinking, that's not that complicated. It's not that complex. Then it's time for the big stuff, the workflow settings. Boom. As you can see, we have a brand new menu here with a bunch of tabs that all have their own automations or workflows that we can go through. Let me run you through every single one of these so that you understand all of these different components and what they do and what they automate, because this is where you're going to want to spend a good amount of time to understand what you are automating. So first we have the GM tab. So this is automation meant for just the game master. So first it's going to ask if you want to auto roll attacks. So that means, automatically roll the attack when you click it from the character sheet. Interesting thing to go together with this, in my opinion, is the auto fast forward attack. I'm skipping a little bit here, but they are related, because without the auto fast forward, you will still have those dialogues pop up saying, do you want to roll normal, disadvantage, advantage? And then when you roll damage, do you want it to be normal or critical damage? I find these to be annoying pop-ups, so I have the auto fast forward attack on together with the auto roll attack. Let's go back to the top. Skip consume resource dialogue. Now, I personally, when I run my D&D 5th edition games, I don't really care about consuming resources that much. Usually that would be like, crossbows, bow and arrow, normal arrows and stuff. I don't really care about that stuff. I don't find it interesting to keep track of that. Your mileage may vary. So if you would like, you can set an auto consume of stuff like resources or spell slots, but since this is the GM, you might not want to do that. Here it says, if set, skip the consume resource dialogue. So basically asking you like, do you want to spend a spell slot or not, etc., unless no spell slot of the correct level is available or the advantage disadvantage keys are pressed when clicking. So you might want to skip that dialogue, you might not want to skip that dialogue. At least I personally find it good to have that dialogue. If you're casting a spell, to know what level you're casting it as, you can choose it there, etc. Then late targeting, which we were talking about earlier. Do you want it to have so that if you don't have stuff targeted, it'll wait for you to target or whatnot? So you can do this on a GM level. Then Auto fast forward attacks, we already talked about. Auto roll damage, I have that set to always, so it will always roll damage for me. And the same thing here, fast forward damage, so that you don't have that pop-up window coming saying, do you want normal damage or critical hit damage? So having these two on speeds the game up for me. Then remove the chat card buttons after roll. So normally, if you don't have the auto roll for attack and damage set, actually you can see it down here, the crossbow right below me there has those two buttons, attack and damage. So that's what you normally get when you roll without, you know, automation set there. You have to click the attack button and then you have to click the damage button to roll separately. So if you don't want the auto rolling to happen, that you want to still click that little button if you want to, that's up to you. You can choose to remove those buttons after you have pressed them. So you can choose to remove both, only one, or just have it completely off so that you can continue clicking that for whatever reason that you want. Then GM role details hiding, entire roll. So this will, you know, hide the details of a GM's role. You will most likely want to have this hidden due to there being a lot more information that a GM roll might have. Then we have hide GM attack, damage, saving throw 3D dice rolls, overriding other settings. This is for merge cards only. So yeah, just hiding 3D dice rolls so that you also hide not just the roll card itself, but the 3D dice rolling as well. But here is also another option for that. In case you don't want to just hide it, you can also display a Dice So Nice if you're using Dice So Nice, which I highly recommend to add 3D dice to your rolls. Ghost rolls rather than hiding the rolls. So from my understanding, the ghost roll means that the dice rolls, but none of the faces have numbers on them. It's just question marks, so that the players know that a dice roll has happened, but they don't know what the result was. So you get that feeling of a GM rolling behind their GM screen, as it were. So that's what we have here in the GM tab. Then let's go to the player tab. This is fairly similar to the GM tab, but more simplified. Again, auto roll attack, as I mentioned. Do you want those buttons to be there when you roll for attack and then damage down here or not? I personally don't need those buttons to be clicked separately, so having auto roll, great. Here, skipping the consume resource dialog. Again, do you want to skip the you're using a spell slot or you're using whatnot resource? Do you want to use it, and then which type of resource you want to use? That is, of course, up to you. I personally don't want to skip that dialogue. Then auto fast forward rolls. Here you can choose which rolls you want to fast forward, i.e. they won't give you that pop-up asking for disadvantage, advantage, normal, or critical hit or normal damage. I want for it to be attack and damage, so that my players just have to click on the thing once and then it will roll the attack, and then if it hits, it will roll the damage. And then we have remove chat card buttons after roll. So same thing as the GM. If you are using those chat card buttons, as you can see down here, down below me right now, if you're using those, do you want to get rid of them? Maybe one of them you don't, maybe one of them you do. I don't know. It's up to you. So these are the first one, GM and player, fairly similar, same things. Then we're getting to the workflow. This is the big one. As you can see, it just popped out real big. So there's a bunch of automation stuff here. Let's go through them one by one. First up, we have targeting. Auto target on template draw. So this means, for example, if you are using a templated spell like Fireball, for example, will draw a huge circle for the range, but the area of the Fireball spell, and enemies that are within that template, when you place it, will automatically be targeted. So you can set that to be always. You can always and then ignore defeated enemies, so the defeated enemies don't get targeted again. You can have walls blocking targeting. This could be something you want, and then walls blocking and ignoring defeated enemies. Using DF template enhancements, which is one of the other modules that you have here, and using walled templates. So these are the options that you can have there. I just use it as always because it's quite nice there. Then you get them targeted. If you're like, oh, there's something that shouldn't be targeted here, you can just remove it, rather than trying to target something and then not understanding why it's not targeting it because of the automation. I like to do it that way myself, but your mileage may vary. Then auto remove placed template on spell expiry. So this will remove the template once the spell has expired, because spells usually will have set up within them their duration, and once that's done, then the template will also be gone, because normally the template will just stick around. Then auto target for ranged target spell attacks. So auto target for ranged target types if the target type is the creature, enemy, ally. Yeah, so you can automatically target for ranged spell attacks. It's kind of similar to the template draw thing, but a little bit different. Then we have require targets to be selected. The default selection here is in combat. What that means is that when you are in combat, this module will not let you roll for attacks or before you have targeted someone. You can set this as in combat, meaning that this only applies when you are in combat. You can have it never, so you don't care about that stuff, or you can have it always, even outside combat. It will say hey, you need to target someone before you attack. Then we have specials, auto apply item effects. So this means that if the target is hit by an item that has an effect that it can apply, it will automatically apply that. For example, let's say you have a hammer that if it hits an enemy, it knocks them prone, for example. Just a random item I made up. Then it would automatically apply the proned status on them, and it would remove the button from chat because there will also be a little button there that says apply effect, so it will remove that button. Then we have apply convenient effects. This is using one of the modules, so it will try to find effects which match the item name when used, so it will just give you more effects that can be used when applying those automatic effects, because by default Foundry has a certain range of effects, or the D&D 5e system I should say, and this will basically add a bunch of more effects that can be applied, and it will try to find the same effect. Then we have the hits category, so auto check if attack hits target. So I find this one to be very, very nice and useful. As you noticed here, probably, you can see this attack thing here below me. My fingers are below me there. You can see that there is a little text that says hits acolyte. So that's because I have this setting turned on, meaning that when a target is attacked, then it will check the attack roll and compare it with the AC, and it will tell you whether it hit or not. I find this to be very, very useful, because otherwise you have to open the character sheet of the enemy to check, like, well, did it hit or did it not hit? And it's a little bit annoying. So here you can have that be on. I like to keep it on, but only have it for the GM so that only I see if it hit or not, because usually that's the kind of information that I want, but I don't want my players to have it all the time. But if you want all players to as well have it, you can have it here as well. Check all see result. But if you don't want it at all, you can also have it as none. If you have another way of keeping track of your AC and comparing, yeah, you can do that. Then you have roll a separate attack per target. So let's say we are doing a AoE spell that requires to be an attack roll to be made to hit the targets. You can make it so that each target will have a separate attack roll made. I don't really care either way myself, but if you care, you can have that ticked off, and then it will make a separate attack roll for each target if there are several targets. And then you can have it display by how much an attack hit or missed per target if you would like. I personally don't really care about this one. If it hits, it hits. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I don't really care if it's close or not. But if you like that information, you can certainly add that. Then we have the saves section. So first off is auto check saves. Automatically check saving throws when a saving throw is required. If disabled, it will assume that all targets fail their save. So here you can choose whether you want to automatically do a saving throw check. You can do it, and then there are a bunch of different options here. All see the results only, all see results plus the save DC, only the GM sees it, all see result plus the rolls. I personally don't like this being on because I like to ask my players, do a strength saving throw or do a blah, blah, blah saving throw, because it gives them agency, in my opinion, to tell them like, hey, please do a saving throw, because then they get to, do the roll and be like, oh, is that enough or not? So I don't like having this automation on myself. Then you can choose if you want to display the saving throw DC. You probably don't, but you might want to. It's up to you. You can display it if you would like. You can put it there. Then display if the save had advantage or disadvantage. You can have that on or not. Actually, yeah, we can leave that on. It's fine. Then this one it sounds a little bit weird. Search item description. What this means is that if there is something that they're saving against, the module will try to search the item's description to try to find out how much less damage they will take if the save is successful. Usually it's half damage, but sometimes it's no damage at all. And then you have the default saving multiplier, meaning that if it can't find anything to check on how much less damage it should take, it will assume that it is half damage. So that type of automation. Then we have prompt players to roll saves. So this I do like, because it will ask the player, okay, hey, please roll a save here. So you can have it in the chat message. You can use Let Me Roll That For You, which is another module that was mentioned in the recommended section. You can use Let Me Roll That For You plus a query. You can use Monk's token bar. So there's a bunch of options here on how you can ask for the players to do a saving throw. And what's important to note here, as it says here, none means the modules roll the save. So if you have none here, then it will automatically roll the saves, and otherwise the players will get a whispered chat message through Let Me Roll That For You or Monk's token bar prompt. So there's a few options that you can go for there. And then we have the same options here for the GM for an unlinked and linked version. I'm not quite sure what the unlinked means here. I believe it's an unlinked actor, so if it's a actor in and of itself, but if it's a token that is linked to an actor, then it will give you a chat message. Otherwise, it will auto roll it for you. And lastly, we have the delay before rolling for players. So how long to wait before taking over the player's save for them in seconds. So if you want, for example, to give the players a Let Me Roll That For You prompt, and then let's say you want to wait 10 seconds, but then you will just auto roll if the players don't react. You could do that, for example, here. Then, I know this part is a long one, but it is the biggest one, so we're already halfway there. Stick around. Then we have the damage section, enhanced damage roll dialog. When using damage roll dialog, displays an enhanced dialog that supports choosing item damage. So this, I believe, you need to have the fast forward turned off because you need to get the damage dialog when you are rolling for damage, and if you turn this on, you can choose the type of item damage that you are doing if you want to add more information to it. Then we have auto apply damage to targets. So here, if you want, you can automatically apply damage to targets. So let's say, the attack hits the acolyte like we saw here. Let's see, hold up. So attack hits there for 3 damage. It would automatically apply that to the token of the acolyte. Now, like I said before, I don't like to have this on because it's hard to track of has the damage been applied actually, and was it the correct amount of damage that was applied. So I lose track of that easily myself, but you might want to do that. So you can turn this on. There is a bunch of options here for you to do so. Then we have the show a player's damage card. So we have a similar type of damage card that we have for NPCs here. We can have for the players as well. There's a bunch of options here. Choose to your heart's content. Then we have applying damage immunities. So you can choose here if you want to apply damage immunities automatically when damage is applied. You can choose never, you can choose to apply, and then down here, it is going to define what that means. So immunity will reduce the damage to 0, resistance will half the damage, and vulnerability will multiply it by 2. If you want to change these for some reason, you can. Then we have require magical property. This means that if you have this off, non-weapons do magical damage, meaning things that are not weapons, which would be, spells, for example, those are considered magical damage. There's a few other options here, meaning non-spells do non-magical damage, meaning weapons do meaning only spells do magical damage by default. All means that no item does magical damage by default. I find this setting to be a little bit confusing, but it is there if you would want. Then here we have the roll other damage formula for ranged weapon attack or melee weapon attack. It is off by default, but you can have if save present, then it will roll the other damage formula, or if activation condition present, and then you will of course have to set the activation condition in the item itself so that it can read it and check if there is the activation condition there, and then it will automatically roll the other damage formula. For example, if you are wielding a longsword with 2 hands, then it will roll the other damage, something like that. Then we have roll other damage formula for spells as well. Here is the same options, and we have some additional information here saying that if it's off, then you don't roll it automatically, and if you have if save, only roll the other damage. If the item has a save and activation, roll the other damage if the activation condition is empty or evaluates to true. So you will have to do some finagling around if you want to get that. All right, that's the workflow section. That was a big one. Good on you for sticking around for that long. We're trucking through, we're pushing on. Then we have the concentration tab, notably smaller than the previous one. This is to enable automatic concentration checks. So this is a very, very useful feature in my mind, because as the GM, I will often forget to ask players to roll for a concentration check when they're damaged, when they have a concentration spell going on. So this will basically take that off your hands. Now, you might notice saying, Fondue, you have it turned off. Why do you have it turned off? It's because I also use Combat Utility Belt, and I use the Concentration Automation Checker from that one. You have to choose one or the other. You can't use both at the same time because they conflict with each other. But if you want to use just Midi QOL for that, you can use it here. And if you have it turned on, there's a bunch of options here. So if the player or you fails the concentration check, then the concentration condition will be removed if you have this enabled. And of course, you need to have the automation itself enabled for any of these to take effect. Then you have single concentration check. So if enabled and the attack roll is just normal damage plus a save plus other/versatile damage, then it's just a single concentration check. You can have that on or off if you want. Then we have temporary HP concentration check. So if you want to trigger a concentration check if temporary HP is lost, you can do that with this. And then lastly, we have remove concentration when effects removed. So if the template and effects of a spell are removed from the scene, then you can remove also the concentration condition, if you would like. That's up to you. Then we have reactions. As you can see, these other tables, not as big. So here we have player reaction processing. First, we have prompt for reactions. Give an attacked actor the option to use a reaction before adjudicating the roll. Reactions when hit require auto check. Hits enabled. Damage reactions if applying damage. So firstly, you need to have the auto check hits enabled. And then do you want to have some kind of reaction check for your players to remind like, hey, you're being attacked. Do you have a reaction you want to use? You can do that just by default and for magic items as well. And then for the GM as well. Then we have a reaction check timeout. So how long do we have that check up before it goes away? Default is 10 seconds. You can finagle with that if you want. And then we have a chat prompt for reactions. If you would like to have a chat prompt go up, down here saying, hey, you can react, you can do that. Then show the attack roll total, attack hits, or d20 roll only. It's up to you. Allow any reaction to spell to be used. Do not require available spell slots or preparation when choosing reaction spells. I personally would probably not go for this because, you know, usually if you want to use a spell, you have to have spell slots, or it has to be a prepared spell if you're a cleric, for example. But if you don't care about that stuff and you say reactions can be all's good, you can check that if you want. And then enforce reactions. This, what it basically means is that it will prompt you when you're using reaction items if a reaction has already been used this round. So saying like, hey, you've already reacted this round, you can't do that. It doesn't do that check by default. You can do it by a status icon, so you get a status icon on your token saying, you know, you've already used it. Characters, you might get a prompt, or then all actors, you get a prompt. And then the same for bonus action if you want to enforce that. Then you have record attacks of opportunity. So if it's not an actor's turn and they use their attack of opportunity attack, they've also used their reaction. You can also, you know, keep record of that if you would like, just for the characters or for all actors. So then, you know, they can also get prompted if you have the enforced reactions on saying, hey, you already used your reaction when you did that attack of opportunity. You can't use your reaction again. If you would like to do this kind of automation, you certainly can. Thank you, Forge. Then we have the Misc. Here I want to highlight an important piece at the top. There's the export Midi QOL settings to JSON file and import Midi QOL settings for JSON file. Now, the term JSON file might not mean much to you. It's just a formatting of data. Don't worry about it. But this is very useful. So what I recommend is if you have several game worlds that you want to use this on, is set everything up in one of your game worlds and be like, cool, this is how I want it to be. Fantastic. Then come here to the Misc setting, click the export Midi QOL settings on JSON file. When you click it, it's going to download a file. I can just show it to you. Boom, went up here. You saw it go up there. Now you see it. Got it, thank you. Then you have it downloaded, and then you can go to your other game worlds, activate all the modules, etc., and then come here to the Misc, import, and then choose a file to import here, and then it will bring all of your Midi QOL settings here, so you don't have to put them one by one to all of your game worlds. It saves you a bunch of time. Anyway, let's look at these other miscellaneous settings here. Add actor on use macro to sheet and add item on use macro to sheet. I am not entirely sure what this does, but from my understanding, it is not super crucial since it says just check the README to be there. Then for item details and chat cards, you can decide what level of detail do you want. Do you just want the card itself? Do you want the details just for PCs? Do you want the details for the NPCs and the PCs? It might be a lot of information if you go for the lower ones, but again, it's up to you. Then merge roles to one card. So this will just merge all of your different roles into a single card. So attack, hit, damage, save. Otherwise, they're going to be in separate cards, which can clutter your chat. But if you like them being separate, you can turn that off. Then condense attack damage rolls. Conserve a little chat log space by making attack and damage rolls smaller. It's up to you if you want them to be smaller or bigger. Then you can color code hit, miss, save displays if you would like. So when you have a chat card there, hits will be green and misses will be in red. So if you want that kind of coloring, you can add it there if you would like. Then we have move roll formula to tooltip. So this essentially is just if you merge the cards as before, then where will the formula be put for your roll? There's the default tooltip, then you can move the formula to the tooltip, or you can have advantage attribution, or you can move the formula to the tooltip and have advantage attribution. Up to you. Fiddle around with it, see what it looks like. Then show fast forward indicator on attack and damage buttons. So just to indicate that when you roll, it is going to be a fast forwarded roll. Then we can have chat cards use the token name, which I particularly like because, you know, otherwise it will use the actor name, which can be confusing if you have several of the same actor in your scene. So if you have several goblins, for example, but they're like goblin 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 that you have named them. If you have that unchecked, then it will just be goblin when there are chat cards, which can be very confusing. And use the actor portrait in the chat card. So the image displayed yonder, you can see the little acolyte over there. It will use the portrait in the chat image, which is quite nice. Makes it a little nicer to read in my opinion. Then you can keep roll statistics. Ever have a player say, oh, I only roll ones every single time? Well, now you can put the data in their face and tell them that's not true. I have the data. So you have a little statistics window here that you can check to see who rolled what, and you can decide how often these statistics are saved. So now they're saved every 20 rolls. If you want it to be more aggressive, say every 5 rolls, you can put that there. But yeah, you have little stats here, and then you can keep the stats only for players. So if you don't really care about stats for NPCs, then you can just have it for players, and then that's easier, and you can show your players what type of rolls they've been having. Then we have fix sticky Alt, Control, and Shift. So if this is set, Midi QOL will attempt to resolve Alt, Control, Shift being stuck on. I personally don't know what causes these situations, but, you know, it's useful to have to get those unstuck. And then you can enable custom Midi QOL sounds to override some sounds. There's a sound configuration window that I will show you a little bit later. Now let's go over to mechanics. If you would like to mark enemies as wounded or actors as wounded, you can do that. If you want to, you can have a certain percentage, let's say 40, if they're under 40% health, you'll mark them as wounded to show that they're, you know, not doing that great. You can do that. Then you have add effect when HP equals 0. So there's a couple of updates here. You can put do not update, which means, you know, nothing happens to the actor, the token. I like to add an effect as an overlay, so it'll do a little skull icon over the token to indicate that this token is in fact dead. And then you had add an effect as an icon, which I believe is a little thing that is next to the token. So it depends on what you like. I like the overlay. Your mileage may vary. Then you have some interesting selections here. All player ability checks are rolled blind, so no one knows what they roll when they roll. Same for ability saves and skill checks. Some tables like to play this way, and if you want to do that, you can certainly do that by selecting any of these 3. Expire 1 hit attack action on rolls. This means don't wait for damage roll before expiring special duration effects. Not quite sure what this is either. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff here, and I'm not 100% on what every single one of these does, but I have a good idea of what stuff does. But, you know, check it out. Incapacitated actors can't take actions or reactions. So, you know, if someone's gone down in a fight, they can't do actions and reactions. That makes sense. But maybe you don't want that on. Maybe you have some kind of alternate rule set for if you go below 0 and you can still do some actions but not everything. Then you want that on. Then check weapon range when attacking. I personally don't really do this because I kind of trust my players to check their ranges when they do their attacks. But if you want to do that, you can do if the target range is outside of the long range, you can do a fail, or if the target range is greater than the long range, you can do disadvantage. It's up to you. Then you can have walls block ranged attacks. You can certainly have different types of checks here. You will need some extra modules. You'll need levels and symbols cover calculator if you want to do these types of cover checks. Those were like the even extra modules that you can install if you want to do like cover calculation, but I personally don't really do cover calculation automatically when it comes to running my games. And here you can see the cover calculator if you want that on. There's symbols cover calculator, which used to be DnD 5e helpers, used to be that module called DnD 5e helpers. And then that module got split into like, I think 4 different modules, all made by symbol. So if you look for symbols, and then there's a bunch of different ones. It's DnD 5e helpers, and then they're basically split into 4 different modules. So if you're using version 10, DnD 5e helpers is there. And then you have levels that can be also used for that. And then you can use the height difference and distance calculations as well if you would like. But, you know, cover calculation, not something I really care about myself. Ability check advantage gives skill advantage. So if you have an advantage on an ability check, then you will have that on a skill that corresponds with that ability if you would like. Auto reroll initiative. So if you are playing in a way that at the start of every new round of combat, initiative is rerolled, you can certainly do that, but there is a warning here that this can break the round turn effect expiry, so I would be careful with this one. Be careful if you want to use this. And there's an experimental feature here, so be careful with it, but you can support undoing item rolls. So if you want to undo a certain roll that you just made, this is an option for you to do that. You have to use this thing here to do it, but you know, again, this is an experimental feature, so be careful. Then we're on to the rules tab here, very small. You can add some, you know, optional rules for yourself. DnD 5e game rules that you wish to enable generally don't work with better rolls. I currently don't use better rolls myself. It's a separate module. Better rolls and Midi QOL used to work together, but better rolls does not work in Foundry version 10 anymore. There's another module called Ready Set Roll, which is basically better rolls brought to Foundry version 10 by a different person, but Ready Set Roll and Midi QOL don't work that well together. So if you are using Midi QOL, I would recommend not using Ready Set Roll. Actually, I'm going to shift away from Ready Set Roll now because Midi QOL does everything except being able to add advantage or disadvantage to a roll when it's already been done. I really wish Midi QOL had that option, but unfortunately it's not there. But yeah, you can add Vitality Pool here and enable D&D Beyond game log support if that's something that you need. And then lastly, we have quick settings. So these are basically options for you to do certain big settings changes here very quickly. For example, if you want GM attack and damage to be automatic, you can click that and it will set the settings for you. Or if you want the no hit saves damage application automation, you can click that and it will set all the message here, and so on and so forth. So these are basically just shortcuts for you to set certain settings here. So if you're kind of lost, you can come here and use this as a starting point for different types of presets. And then, of course, always remember to hit the Save Settings button so that you save them. And then when you close this window, also hit the Save Changes button here. And lastly, I just want to show this Configure MIDI Custom Sounds. So this is actually going to look different for you if you do this for the first time. But essentially, you can set playlists or sounds for certain types of events. For example, if there's an attack roll or if there's a melee weapon attack, etc., you can set specific playlists or sounds if you would like. It does require quite a bit of setting things up. I personally haven't bothered with it, but here also there's the quick settings options as well. You can create sample playlist, basic settings, detailed settings, full settings, etc. to save some time. But yeah, this will require some setting up on your part. And then, as I mentioned, remember hit save changes, because otherwise your changes will not be saved if you just hit the X icon over there. Oh yes, and lastly, before we leave, let me show you the control stuff that I mentioned before. So we're going to go to game settings, then we have configure control. You can see there right above me. We're going to click that, configure controls here. Then we have a new option here now called Midi QOL. So if we click that, you can see here that we have the control options for Midi QOL. There's not a huge amount of things here, but you can essentially go here and change any of the controls that I mentioned before. Like I mentioned, I usually would want to have these. So advantage is now by default, it's alt left, it's on alt, and then disadvantage is on control. I would probably put Shift and Control because that's kind of what I like. So what I would do is you can go up here to the little pencil icon. By the way, there's a little warning here because it says that there's a potential conflict of using the same key for a bunch of stuff. We just click this and then we hit, since it's Advantage, I want to say it's Shift. So we hit Shift here. And then we also go for the secondary one, which would be Right Shift. And then we just hit the save icon here and boom, it saved those. And then we're going to go for Disadvantage. That's already on Control, so that's fine. We can leave it as is. Don't know what these two icons are since I can't see them properly. But that's how you change the controls, and that is Midi QOL, folks. The only thing, like I said, I wish this had is once I have made a roll, let me move my camera so that I'm not in the way. Once I've made a roll, for example, this one here, I wish there was a way for me to add a disadvantage or advantage to this roll. That's one thing I really like about better rolls and Ready Set Roll is that I can add advantage or disadvantage easily to a roll if I already made it. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, there's no way to do that in Midi QOL. If you know about a way to do that, by the way, let me know. I would love to hear that. But that's basically it. That's Midi QOL, folks. I hope this was useful for you. And now over to the outro. There you have it. Now you should be able to set up Midi QOL to automate exactly the things you want in your D&D 5e games in Foundry. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I'll be making a part 2 to this automation video where I go through another automation module that builds on top of Midi QOL. Subscribe to my channel to know when that video goes live. What things are you going to automate with Midi QOL? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear how you use this module in your games. And hey, even if you don't want to use this module, just leave an emoji as a comment for engagement. Also, while you're down there, I would kindly ask you to like this video because then more people can see it in my channel, and that would mean so much to me. On the screen right now, you're going to see another video of mine where I show you different techniques that you can use to animate your maps inside Foundry VTT, including using light sources. You should check it out. Your players will be impressed. Thanks a lot for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.